Expressed in the following program are those of the producer and not necessarily those of WKTV Community Media.
Hello, everybody. This is Brandon Jose. Welcome to another episode of the Grand Rapids Ghost Hunters podcast. On today's episode, we'll be welcoming Erick Szilagyi of the uNcomfortable podcast. If you go looking for it on the podcast site, its logo's got kind of a lowercase u, uppercase N, and then has comfortable underneath to make sure you find the right one. But Erick, if you just want to give a little bit of the kind of background of your show and kind of what you cover on it a little bit, just kind of a brief synopsis of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, as far as trying to find the show on any of the podcast platforms, if you put on uNcomfortable Erick, Erick afterwards, it for whatever reason, if you put my first name in there, it pops right up. So that's a little tip. Yeah, hey, I've been, we're not quite 2.5 years into it now. And, man, I just had a lifetime of paranormal experiences, so I have a lot of interest in it. And it started off crazy enough with an obsession about UFOs when I was 5. And I don't understand how I got so into UFOs at that time, because there really wasn't that much out there about them, not like there is today. That was kind of the gateway. And then I moved into Bermuda Triangle, Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot. And, by the time I was in my teens, I had already had one experience that was kind of troubling. And then moved forward a little bit later in life, lost my dad when I was 21. And about 9 months later, man, I had some very, very convincing and very pointed interactions with what I can only explain was him 9 months after his death. And so, those kind of things, they stay with you. And I don't know, I started out of boredom during the pandemic. A guy that I coached high school football with, he was a sports broadcaster on a web platform as far as broadcasting high school football. And we coached together. And one day I went over to his house and said, "Hey, you ever think about doing a podcast?" And we had a couple of beers, talked about it, and we pulled out his equipment and we made our first one. And it was called Beyond Sports with Biggie and Bob. And it was basically just about our local community, which was Niles, Michigan. And we just covered local sports. We covered local businesses and, talked to the mayor and talked to school town council, all kinds of people around town. And we got a pretty decent little group of listeners, from that community, but it was only about just that neighborhood, really. And I wanted to do a show about Bigfoot, and he gave me the big roll of the eyes, and he wasn't too into it. And I found a couple of guys that later turned out to be not great people. But they did know some things about investigating Bigfoot sightings in the state of Michigan. And for that part of it, it was a good show. The show did really well. And then I wanted to do another one about UFOs. And I started getting some pushback from them. And I got it because, we were pretty much like local community and sports kind of driven. So it wasn't really a good fit for the show. It was like putting a square peg into a round hole. And, he gave me some pushback, and rightfully so. I mean, it wasn't anything, we didn't have a falling out about it or anything, but then I started thinking to myself, it's like, you know what? I really want to talk about this stuff. And so I went out, I invested the the money in a good recording equipment and good microphones. And I set my sights on doing a paranormal podcast. And here we are 2.5 years later and going strong. I got about 30,000, 32,000, I think, downloads a month. Listen Notes has it rated as in the top 1% in the world, which sounds really impressive. But when you know that there's 2.8 million active podcasts in the world, that puts me in like a group of 80,000. So it's not that impressive, but nonetheless, from being nobody and no real listener base to begin with, I'm really proud of what that's become. And I don't see an end at all. It's going strong. I'm seeing growth every month, and we'll just keep doing it. So I really enjoy, we talked about this before we started recording, about going out and doing the actual investigating, or even if you're not going out with a bunch of equipment and doing that investigating, actually just going out and experiencing these things, whether it's in a graveyard or a penitentiary or, a insane asylum or something like that. It's cool to do. But after so many times, it's like, what else are you expecting to happen? So I think the thing for me with, sitting behind a studio and recording with people who have had other experiences in a variety of things, everything from, one guy kind of local here to me who felt like he had been visited by what he claimed to be an extraterrestrial when he was 17, to, Bigfoot sightings. Like I said before we started recording, I'm local to South Bend, Indiana, but I spent my 20 years of my life living in Michigan, in lower Michigan. So, Michigan is a home away from home. And pretty much every time I leave the house, I'm either headed into South Bend to work, or if I'm going to do something fun, it's up into Michigan. So a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that I still live in Michigan, which I'm fine with. But I am actually like right at the state line. So a lot of my shows are from people in Michigan. I never made it I never made an effort to only go after stories out of Michigan, but they kind of found me. So that's been a pretty cool thing about it too, as well.
Yeah, I know with our show, we try to reach out to like all over. We started, like when we first started, we were just trying to do as a way to kind of connect with other local teams.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, ours started a little bit different, because ours started with, we did like an event, and we had like a public access station, WKTV, that was with us. And then they like, oh, we would really like for you guys to do a show with us. So that's how we got started with our show. But
yeah, it's all about networking, to get any kind of growth. It's pretty important to get some time in front of other people's audiences. That way you get out to a new segment of the population and new people are hearing you. That's always a great way to help grow the show. And, it's been a fortunate thing for me. I've really enjoyed the doors that it has opened. I'm in no way, shape, or form a celebrity or anything, but, it's given me the opportunity last year in September. And again, this September, I'll be hosting Bigfoot and Brews, which is a brewery in Dowagiac, Michigan, Sister Lakes Brewing Company. And it happens to be about 1.5 miles away from the 1964 Dewey Lake monster sighting. And that whole community has embraced the Dewey Lake monster so readily that you can't look anywhere without seeing a Bigfoot cutout, or somebody who's had a tree taken down and then had somebody, a chainsaw artist, come in and render a 10-foot tall Bigfoot in their front yard from the tree that's left over. So that was really exciting. Last year, my head speaker was Ron Moorhead, who, is 50 years plus synonymous with Bigfoot research and the recording of the Sierra Sound. So that was a bucket list to have him actually appear at one of my events. I never fancied myself to be a promoter or somebody that was putting on these types of events, but it seemed like the thing to do, and the brewery was really, really receptive to it. We had a great turnout. We had a great day, perfect weather, and it went so well that now we want to do it again. So I'll be announcing sale on the tickets for that probably within the next 2 weeks. So it'll be back at that same brewery. It's a really neat area. It's a unique area because there's like, I believe 11 small inland lakes within a 6-mile radius. So a lot of lake cottages, a lot of people there from the summer, from Chicago and surrounding communities. They come in, do their weekly or bi-weekly rentals, and it's just got a really nice feel around there. And the people at the brewery are fantastic. So it was a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to doing that again.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. So like when you talk about like some of the investigations you've done, like what are some of the like stories or that you've had or personal like paranormal experiences that you've had?
Well, I'll tell you the most recent thing that I did, and it wasn't something that I was really expecting. A buddy of mine plays in a band, and he got a gig playing a fundraiser for I can never remember the name of this place. I don't know why, but it's the old sheriff house and jail in Crown Point, Indiana. And he said, man, I'd really like you to come see it and tell me what you think about it. And I was like, yeah, okay, because I was supposed to go to another one, and I ended up missing it. I had some previous engagement. So I went this past Saturday, and he sent me the link of how to get there and everything. And when you open it up, like in the very first paragraph, it says the old sheriff's house and jail can be seen on Ghost Hunters, Paranormal Survivor, and YouTube. Evidence from the jail and the sheriff's house has been undeniable, and experiencers, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, holy crap, this place is supposedly haunted. So I got really excited about it and asked a friend of mine to go with me. And so we sat and we watched him play for about an hour, and he packed all his stuff up, and I had made contact with the woman who runs the event there. And I said, if there's any chance and you're not too busy, I'd love a chance to walk through here. And it was really neat because she already knew who I was. I don't know how she got that information, but it was kind of flattering because she got two of her group to take me, and we went through for what had to be a good 90-minute tour. And I certainly wasn't expecting that. And, going back and looking on their website now that, that you can go do tours for that length of time, but they charge, and they didn't charge me. So the interesting thing about it is Johnny Depp portrayed John Dillinger in a movie a few years ago. I can't remember what the name of it was, but in real life, John Dillinger was actually held at this jail for about a period of 3.5 weeks before he was moved somewhere else. Well, during the filming of the Johnny Depp film, Universal had come in and basically taken one cell block in that jail and did their whole movie magic to it. So they put a new fresh paint all on the walls. They put up walls that did not exist there before that looked like brick, but it was actually just paneling. And they put these massive steel doors on the fronts of the jail cells, which really, really looked intimidating until you got close to them and you realized that they were made out of wood and you could just knock on them and it was just fake props. So that's where they did the filming for that scene in the Johnny Depp movie. So that was kind of cool to see. And we had gotten down into once he got out of that place, everything became much more rusted and old and decrepit. And we got into one part, and I I felt great all day long. I wasn't having any issues whatsoever. And we got into this one, area, and man, I started just getting the terrible stomach cramp. It was just like almost wanted to double me over, And I was like, oh man, am I going to have to leave this tour and, like go use the facilities or whatever? And once we got out of that hall, it was gone just like that. And I was like, I just kind of put that in the back of my head. And I was like, that was strange, but okay. And we had walked through, they literally took us on a tour of every one of the detention areas. And they were really good about telling us what a lot of the people who go there on a tour claim to experience. And about a half hour before it was over, we had gone into what was the area that they held the women. And it was a much smaller area because typically there wasn't a lot of women that were being held there. But there was this like old rusted table that was kind of up against the bars. And I was wearing out. It was getting late, and I just kind of sat back against the corner of that table, and I reached up behind me and I grabbed a hold of one of the cell bars, and I was just holding on to it, and I was kind of stretching my back a little bit, and I felt this very slightest little brush against the back of my hand. And I pulled my hand back down, and I was like, yeah, that was probably a spider web or maybe even a spider crawling across it. I was like, I don't want to do that. And the guy kept talking, and what he was talking about was that a lot of men have reported in that area having like the front of their pants or their trousers kind of tugged on, like around the crotch area, and some even feeling like they were being like cupped by hand. And I kind of started laughing because I just out of habit, I just reached back my hand again, and I really wasn't thinking about it, but I put my hand back up on that bar, and I felt across the back of my hand a much more obvious that something felt like a finger going across the back of my hand. And that one made me jump. Not so much that it scared me, but it was, I wasn't expecting it. Yeah. And, I pulled my hand back real quick, and I was like, ooh. And he looked at me and he goes, "You all right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." He's like, "What happened?" And so I told him, I said, literally felt like somebody ran their finger across the back of my hand. And he kind of started laughing. And then the woman that was with him, she kind of took over and kept talking. And like immediately he was like, I need to take a break. And this guy is there all the time. I mean, he's one of the group that investigates that on a regular basis. He's a tour guide, and he excused himself from that cell block. And so, we went back on the tour, and that last rub against the back of my hand was in my head pretty good. I was like, there was nobody. It was dark. There was a little bit of ambient light. I know that nobody walked behind me and was able to, be on the opposite side of the cell. It was weird. And we caught up with him a little bit later, and we finished the tour. We stood around, we talked for a little while, and then we left. We hadn't ate before we got there, so we were looking for a place to go grab some grub before we headed back to South Bend. And I sat down at the table, and somebody says, "What's up with the back of your hand?" And I looked, and on the back of the same hand, I had a bunch of red, I want to call them scratches because that's what they looked like. But they weren't welted up. They didn't sting. They didn't hurt in any way, but there were 5 or 6 of them that ran across the back of my hand in the same direction that, they weren't going this way. They were running the same direction that I felt whatever touched my hand. And I was like, I don't know what that is. But, in the back of my head, I'm like, that's exactly where I was getting touched. And so I took a couple of pictures of it and I got them on my cell phone here. So yeah, I mean, that was weird. I mean, there was nothing on the other side of that bar. And I mean, it's not, I don't stand around with my hands, with my fingers like tucked into my jeans pockets, so it wasn't that. I didn't brush up against anything. I didn't scratch myself. I don't know what the hell it was, but I do know that it was very obvious. You can see it in the pictures. And then it was about an hour and a half drive back home to South Bend. And by the time I got back to South Bend, it was completely gone. Absolutely not a trace of it. So it was weird. It wasn't anything that stained my, it wasn't like I brushed up against something that was kind of reddish. I tried to wipe it off. It wasn't going away. It was weird. It was strange. So that's my most recent experience. Something that was a little bit darker than I like to delve into. I mean, some investigators, they push that envelope, they go in there with a Ouija board, or, they're inviting things to use their energy, or, you can use me to talk through, or, stuff like that. I will absolutely not do that. I don't think that's smart. And I don't think anything good comes from that. So, and I don't go provoking. I had an interview with a gentleman and his lady friend who they were delving into. He always wants to do UFO stuff, and she claims to be more on the witchy side of things. So I had them on, and she started telling me a story about how when she lived by herself, I think it was in either North or South Carolina, she had this old mirror, and it was a type of mirror that was poured. You ever see those really old mirrors that they have that weird tarnishing to it, and you can see like multiple layers to it.
They're kind of like the Myrtle's plantation mirror.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she had gotten this mirror somehow, passed down through however she got it. And she claimed that she had this really ugly electrical box, a fuse panel in her one room that was like right out where everybody could see it. So she decided to hang this mirror over this electrical box. And, anybody who is kind of privy to some of the things that paranormal investigators will do, scrying is, the use of a mirror. A lot of people seem to think that, entities can take up residence in a mirror. If there's truth to that, putting it somewhere where there was a directly against the most power coming into the house that you could possibly find probably wasn't the best idea. So she said that she started being visited nightly by an unseen entity that would essentially have its way with her. And, she was describing an incubus. She talked about it in a kind of a matter of fact kind of way. And that kind of put me off a little bit. I was like, And I stopped her during her, and I said, "No, hang on a second now." You know, I mean, that's a pretty traumatic thing, that if it was doing what you're alluding to, that's a pretty traumatic thing for a woman or anyone to go through. How did you deal with that? You know, did you end up having to talk to somebody? And I guess what my next question was going to be was, you know, how did they respond to that? Did they, did they roll their eyes and say you were crazy, or, tell you that it was, your imagination or whatever? But she never really answered that question. I could tell there was a little bit of pushback. So I moved on to the next segment, and we continued the conversation. After that recording was done and I shut it off, we stayed on and we continued to talk for another 15 or 20 minutes. And I was literally sitting right here where I am right now. They were on the screen in front of me. And in the darkness of my studio, right now, there's still some ambient light outside. So this was probably around 11 o'clock at night. So it was very dark in here except for the studio lights. And I saw, what I can only explain is, I saw a black shadowy head stick up from behind my computer monitors. I have dual monitors here in front of me. I saw what looked like a head pop up from behind the right monitor. And it caught my attention quickly. And I looked back at the screen. And when I looked back at the screen on their image, I could see a dark shadow cross across her. They were both sitting on a couch. And I think they had their laptop or webcam on a coffee table in front of them. And I saw a shadow cross across her. I didn't see it go across him. I just saw it go across her. And when I said, I just saw a shadow, she went like this and said, "Oh my God, what was that?" And I said, "What?" And she said, "There was just a big bright flash of light, like on her screen viewing me. She saw a bright flash of light." So I saw that head pop up behind my monitor, which could have been my eyes playing tricks on me. I'm open to saying that. But then I saw the shadow cast across her, and then she sees this bright flash of light appear on my screen, which I was in, other than the studio lights, I was in complete darkness. There was no flash of light, but she said it was like somebody took a flash picture. It was just that strobe. So that was a strange night, because I had a very overwhelming sense that there was something that it wasn't here to mess with me. It wasn't here to try to get me. But I got the feeling that it was kind of that, "I know you saw me." And I don't know why. It's a weird gut feeling that I had. It was like, "We know you're looking for us. We're looking back at you," is kind of the sense that I got. And that was a foreboding one. I did not like that. So, I have a couple of friends of mine who, I was born and raised Catholic, not practicing. So, I still have belief in a creator, and I still have faith, and I still say prayers to whoever that creator is. I have belief in it. So I was calling on that night. And I also reached out to a couple of people that I know, I trust very well, that I guess you would consider to be light workers. And I was like, "Hey, I don't always see eye to eye with you guys on this, but do me a favor and just kind of do a little light blast for me, because I didn't like seeing what I saw behind the monitor here." I had, and I can't even say it, in the way that it looked, it appeared the same way when I was a young child, probably in the neighborhood of 8 or 9, maybe 7 or 8. I filled my days with UFO magazines, checking out books out of the school library about Bigfoot. I loved monster movies. I don't know if you guys ever were old enough to know of the Son of Svengoolie, which was a kind of a campy TV show out of Chicago, Illinois. The guy dressed up like a ghoul, and during commercial breaks, he would come on and he'd do this little shtick, and then it would be like a creature feature. There'd be, whatever, the Mummy or whatever would be on. And, I would go to sleep, and naturally, a young kid, I'd be scared to death because, my entire day was spent looking at horror movies or, weird stuff. And I remember I used to have to sleep with the hallway light on outside my bedroom, and I could never sleep with my door completely shut. I always had to have it about, that much open. And, I was an only child, and the only 2 people that lived in the house was my dad and my mom and myself. And I can remember rolling over and facing the door to my bedroom, and there was a black silhouette standing there. Now, it made sense that it was a black silhouette because the hallway light was on, and the light in the hallway was behind the person that was standing there. But the thing that really stood out to me was my dad was a short, stout guy that had a flat top haircut every day of his life. And my mom was a little bit shorter than him, kind of roly-poly, and she had very curly hair. This silhouette that I saw was not either one of them. It was a taller, looked like a male frame. And the thing I can remember was you could see nothing, even standing where it was standing with the light in the hallway ceiling above him, behind it, you would have seen over the shoulder, you would have seen the color of a shirt, or, some glint of light off the shine of the hair. You would have seen something, and there was nothing there. It was just all black. And it scared the hell out of me. And that was, I guess you'd say, that was my experience with a shadow person. It was something that I never talked about. I never told my parents because I didn't want them to get upset with me for having a nightmare, because they were going to tell me that I couldn't read my UFO books anymore and I couldn't watch the creature features and stuff like that. So I never told them about it. And even during the course of doing this show, it was something that I kind of put so far on the back burner that I never talked about it. And I ended up having an interview with a psychic medium, and she had done a lot of work in the Conjuring house. And as a thank you for me having her on my show, she offered if I would like to have her do a reading. And I was really excited about that because I had tried to have a couple of readings done before in years past. And the one place that I went to, I was taken to on my birthday, and the sign was up. It said open. We knocked on the door. Somebody looked through the little peephole, the security peephole in the door. You could see the light got blocked out, but they would never open the door. So we did that we knocked on that door a couple of times, and then we just finally left. And it was a couple of years later, I had gone to some kind of a fair, like a craft fair or something. And there was a psychic booth, and there was quite a number of people around it. So I was like, I'm going to go over there and see, try to talk to her and see if it even sounds remotely plausible that she might be legitimate. And me and another lady that was in the same group, we walked up together, and she looked up at me, and she looked over at the girl that was with me. And she looked back at me and she goes, "I'm sorry, hon, I'm not going to read you." She says, "I'll do her, but I'm not going to read you." And I was like, what the hell? Why not? you know? And she said, "I'm sorry." And I said, "Well, can you at least tell me why?" And she's like, "Nope. Honey, did you want a reading?" And she's like, "No, that's all right. Thank you." And we both walked away, and she goes, "Well, that was weird." And I'm like, "It's weirder than you think," because like, that's the second time I got snubbed. So when this psychic medium that I had on the show, when she offered it, I was like, "Hell yeah, let's do it. I'm interested," And of all the things that she brought up that shadow person. And she said she was confounded by it because she could not read where it was from. She said, typically I can get a sense that it was an earthbound spirit, or it was, something elemental or something like that. She's like, I had no reading on this thing. She says, I could tell that it was not malevolent, but she said it wasn't necessarily there for good either. She's like, I don't know what the hell it was. And that kind of spooked me, because I was like, well, what the hell does that mean? I mean, you can tell people, where they misplaced their car keys, and, you can tell all these other things. And she's like, I'm sorry. She's like, I just don't know what the hell it is. She says, all I can tell you is that wasn't the first time. And it shows up when you're in times of like where you have a lot of questions, like you're in flux. So I don't know what the hell that was, but I know what I saw. I was awake, and it scared the hell out of me. So, but I found it very strange that, she picked up on some things that were pretty spot on. And excuse me. I started a Facebook page to help promote the show. I never had Facebook just as a personal thing. And I don't have the need that so many people do to put my life out there for other people. I don't have a large family where, I've got people all over the US that, I'm trying to stay in touch with. So Facebook was never a thing that ever appealed to me. I guess I say that because, some psychics or mediums are accused of, phishing. They can go on your social media and they can tell that you have a white car, or, that you're with a girl all the time. You see a ring on her finger. That means it's your wife. There's a lot of easy ways to fish for information and come across sounding like you're spot on. And there really was no way that she would have had any indication that the things that she was telling me, how accurate they really were. So that was my first experience with a medium that till this day, I completely legitimate. I mean, the woman has significant gifts. So, yeah, but it's just, when I first started doing this show, and, the number of people that I've talked to people who have had Bigfoot experiences, that they've literally seen Bigfoot. I've had other people that have been around and heard the sounds. I've had people that have witnessed UFOs. I believe I witnessed one myself, but so many different people, so many different experiences. And one of the things I get a lot is that I'll have people contact me and, you're so intuitive that you ask the questions that I wanted. If it was me talking to this person, I'd be asking those questions. And I don't think it's intuitive as much as I'm speaking. A lot of the time I'm speaking from a point of having experienced so many things myself in my life that I can duly relate to what they're telling me. And I don't know. It's funny because the show is called Uncomfortable. I named it that because, we'd probably be talking to somebody who was uncomfortable with being recorded. We'd be talking about some topics that would make some listeners uncomfortable. I never really ever thought about it making me uncomfortable until episode 5, which I can get into if you want to. But so many people tell me that I have an ability to make them very comfortable when they're on the show. And that wasn't a planned thing. I mean, I want people to be comfortable, but the name and that was not a planned thing. But people seem to be very comfortable telling me about their stories and allowing me to be a kind of a gatekeeper of their stories. And that's I had a conversation with a couple of other podcasters. That's a pretty heavy weight at times for somebody to trust you and to have the faith in you that you're going to present their story in a way that is fair. You're not going to be creating judgment, and you really listen and pay attention to what they're saying and ask probing questions about it, to put people at ease. And I mean, I guess that's maybe a God-given gift that I have, but I appreciate having it. It does tend to make things a little bit easier when you're doing this. Episode 5, as far as the name Uncomfortable, episode 5 kind of put me on the map, I think. It was I had a listener early on when I was still only getting maybe 70, 80 listens per show. And I was wondering to myself, it's like, what the hell am I doing here? This is never going to go anywhere. Somebody messaged me on Facebook Messenger and said, hey, I know a witch, a Native American witch, and I think you ought to talk to her. I think she'd be a good fit for your show. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Give me her information. So he did. And I was under the impression that she was going to be, as far as a Native American witch, I was expecting something like a medicine woman or a tribal shaman or something like that. That wasn't the case. This was a down and out, complete witch in the sense of what you would all expect witch to be. She practiced both black and white magic. She was a lovely person, very friendly, very personable. But I had basically decided to do this episode with her, and I was fishing for a really good name for the episode because I kind of wanted to hook people. I wanted somebody to see the name of that episode and be like, wow, what is that? I got to listen to it. And so I came up with the idea of calling it Date Night with a Witch or Dinner with a Witch. And I talked to my son about it, and he's like, Dad, you're trying to get this thing off the ground. And he's like, with all the people talking about toxic masculinity and all that stuff, he's like, I don't know that it's a great idea for you to advertise this as you taking a witch out on a date. And I was like, yeah, you're probably right. Because what I was going to do was I was going to invite her out, buy her dinner, and figure, because with my shows, I like to do my vetting process is usually an hour, somewhere in the neighborhood of an hour conversation with somebody, just so I can see what the feel is going to be like, how the flow of conversation is going to go, and whether or not we were going to be a good fit. It's also my time where my gut, which serves me very good, is going to tell me whether I think you're pulling the wool over my eyes or if you legitimately have something to talk about. And so I was going to ask her to dinner before we did the recording. And after talking to my son, it's like, yeah, you're right. That's probably a bad idea. So I got out of work. I stopped at McDonald's, got myself a Big Mac and a Coke, and came home, packed all of my stuff up, and I was backing out of the driveway to get ready to go to her house because she only lived about 30 minutes from me. And let me reiterate by saying I have learned not to go do episodes with. I'm backing out of the driveway, and she texts me, "Have you ate yet?" I said, "Yeah, actually I have." And she says, "Oh, shoot." And then I said, if you need to back up a half hour so you can get yourself something to eat, I have no problem with that. It's not that big of a deal. And she's like, "No, I was really hoping you could go get something to eat." And at this point, I'm thinking, why is she? I mean, this is exactly what I wanted to do to begin with. And, I talked myself out of it. And I said, "Listen, if you want to go grab something to eat, I'm happy to go have a drink with you. I've already ate. We can go grab something to eat, and I'll have a drink, and then we can do our thing." And she said, "Okay, great. I'll be ready when you get here." So I get there. I open up. I pull up into the driveway, knock on the front door. She comes out, and I was immediately struck by this overwhelming, I don't know how to say this. I've said it so many times, and every time I say it, it makes me sound like a bad person, but it was a very strong desire for her. And, quite frankly, she was a lovely woman, not my type. But there was just like immediately, I mean, I had these like thoughts running through my head. And so she comes out, I go over to the passenger side door. I open it for her. We get in, we drive about 20 minutes to a restaurant. We eat. And the bill comes to the table. I told her, I said, "I'll pay for the meal. That's my thanks for you doing the podcast for me." And I thought it was really odd because the bill came to the table and it was $46 even. And it's like, when have you ever gone anywhere and bought anything and had your bill come to exactly, because I had a whiskey and Coke, might have had two of them. She had a burger and fries and something to drink. It struck me as being odd that it was even $46. So we get back into the car and we drive back. And like I said, it was only 20 minutes from her house. And she took me around these twisting, turning roads, and she showed me where her mom had lived before. And then we get to this corner that has a guardrail going around it. And you can see there's a fire lane cut into the woods. And she says, pull over. So I pulled over, and she got out of the car and she stepped up to like the guardrail, and she put her hands up like this, and she yelled out into the woods, and she went whoop, whoop, did this whoop sound. And I'm telling you, like in less than 10 seconds, there's a whoop comes back from out of the woods. And she ducks her head down. She looks in the car and she goes, "Wasn't that cool? That's where my big boy lives." And I'm like, "Your big boy?" And she goes, "Yeah, SETI." And I'm like, who is SETI? And she's like, "He's a Sasquatch." And I was like, "What?" And so that was weird, especially considering I heard a whoop come back. And so we get back in the car, and we go down the street, maybe a half a block, and we turn left, and boom, we're right there at her house. It was like, how the hell were we this close? So we got inside. She took me up these really, really narrow stairs to the the upstairs of the house. And she opened up a door, and on the front of the door, there was, I guess you would say it was either a dog man or a werewolf painting that was hanging on the door. And she opened up the door. We walked inside, and immediately I'm standing there right by her bed. And so now I'm thinking, like, with the the feelings that I was having when she first opened up the door, and now she's taking me into her bedroom. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And she set up this card table in front of me. I sat down in a recliner, and then she pulled up a chair on the other side of it. I put my broadcast equipment up there, and I had a microphone in front of each of us and a pair of Mickey Mouse headphones on each of us. And we started talking. And as we're talking, I'm looking around her room, and there's figurines of ravens. There's dream catchers hanging up. There's pictures of Loki. There's Native American headdresses. There's feathers all over the place. Very dark pictures, like scary looking stuff, and I mean, okay, she fancies herself to be a witch. And, I like Star Wars. So I have, a corner of my house has a lot of Star Wars stuff in it. So I'm thinking, if this is the personality that she wants to imbue on herself, naturally you're going to have, Halloween looking stuff up all the time. And, but I just thought it was a little overkill, and it actually made it kind of dark in there. And I mean, dark as in the feel of it. And so I'm sitting in this recliner, which is up against the wall, and the door that we came into was right off to my left-hand side. And as we're talking, and this is maybe it's into it, she starts talking about this African-American woman who had lived in the house, a couple of families or a couple of owners prior, who died in the house and would traverse the hallway in her bedroom pretty readily as a ghost. And I was like, oh, that wouldn't be so great, when you're sleeping up here. And as she's saying this, I see this. Now, let me preface by saying that she lived and took care of her ailing brother in the same home. He had some kind of a disability. I don't know what it was. But I noticed out of the corner of my left eye, this hand reach in and just kind of wave. And it wasn't waving at me. It was obviously waving at her, who was sitting across from me. And, we kept talking, and in my brain, I just assumed that was him. And, he was like acknowledging that he was home or whatever, and wasn't going to interrupt, but just wanted to let her know that he was home, or let her know that he was home. And then it quickly hit me that the doorknob to the door was right beside my left shoulder, and the door would have had to have opened right beside me for that arm to come through, because when we got into the bedroom, she closed that door and it was still closed. And I was like, oh, well, I just saw a ghost arm reach through the door and waved at her. And then that kind of put me a little on edge. We got a little bit further into it, and the back wall of her bedroom was pretty much all windows, and it faced out to the road. And then across the road was a farmer's field. And you ever notice, like, when you go past a big farmer's field, they've always got that one little splotch of land that still has trees and everything on it. And you always wonder, it's like, the whole 60 acres is completely clear. Why did you just leave the trees in that one little spot? I still don't know the answer to that, but that was probably 40, 50 yards off the road into that field out in back of her bedroom. And she was in the middle of a sentence. She just got done pronouncing the word and at the end of her pronunciation of the word and, the loudest, most percussive, concussive, just the magnitude of this sound that came into that room, I immediately just ripped my headphones off. and I was just covered with chills. I mean, I had chill bumps everywhere, on the sides of my torso, on my kneecaps, everywhere. I had chill bumps. I'd never had chill bumps before. And I said, what the hell was that? And she and I, I whipped my headphones off. She whipped around and looked at the back window. And then she looked back at me and she goes, did you hear that? And I was like, hell yes, I heard that. What the hell was that? And she goes, that was him. That was SETI. And I was like, the Bigfoot? And she said, yeah. And I was like, to explain how that made my body react, the initial thought was, shit, I left my gun in the car, was the first thing that went through my mind. And the second thing was, shit, I got 40 pounds of dog food in my back seat. Two strange thoughts to run through your head. But these chills that I had they kind of came in a wave. I got them initially when I heard that loud noise. And I know the sensitivity of these microphones. I know the quality of the recording equipment I had. I knew damn well that whatever that was, I captured it on recording. And the chills kind of subsided, but then they came back, but it wasn't quite as strong. And then it subsided and it came back again. Only it wasn't quite as strong. And then it subsided. It did that like 4 or 5 times. And that was a really weird feeling. I didn't know what to make out of that. Post interview, when I got home late that night, the first thing I did when I got home, I stayed up till like 2:00 in the morning because I was going to get that audio on my damn computer and listen to it. And when I got it on the computer, I was so disappointed because I got to the part where she says, and so faintly, so very faintly in the background, you can hear this very slight, ooh, almost like an owl, like a hoot owl. And then you hear me say, what the hell was that? And you hear her say, did you hear that? And then we were obviously talking about the event that happened, but it was not on tape. All I got on tape was this, ooh. And that just flabbergasted me. I'm like, and it took me the better part of a week to realize, after all the Sasquatch encounters that I've read about and that I've heard and that I've had relayed by people, like on Sasquatch Chronicles or in different documentaries and stuff like that, the thing that I got was, I was like, holy shit, that's what people mean when they get zapped. In, the Bigfoot community, people say they get zapped by these things. And I was like, and when I put that into context, it was like that feeling that I was having, that wave that I was feeling, it was kind of electrical, not like static electricity, but it was like kind of electrical. And I was like, holy shit, I got zapped. That's what that was. It was infrasound. And when I started investigating more and digging deeper into into actual infrasound, what I experienced and what I thought was a sound was actually just getting hit by infrasound. That's what my body reacted to. It was a very jarring event. And I thought that I heard it, but I think what happened was I felt, and I associated, I never felt anything like that before. So I think I associated this sound that was so bombastic. I know it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It still doesn't. But at this point I was like, she's talking about using dark magic and and using light magic. And, she had this niece that had gotten treated not so well by our boyfriend. And she ended up, her and a couple of the women from her coven had put a curse on him. And he basically, according to her, vomited blood for 3 days, was in the hospital. The doctors never were able to find anything. And after that, they just kind of called it off, and, they let him go back home with never knowing why he was vomiting blood. But later, I mean, if that wasn't enough, at the end of the recording, she had sat down on the edge of her bed. She was wearing blue jeans. She was wearing a brown car length leather coat. And I had just packed all my stuff up into my gear bags, and I had literally had them in my hands. And she was sitting on the edge of her bed. And the only thing that I've ever been able to like correlate this to is, what an Etch-a-Sketch is?
Yeah.
Okay. So have you ever looked at the screen of an Etch-a-Sketch? There's this like shiny, powdery, sandy stuff that's underneath the glass, and that's what the stylus runs through, right?
Yeah.
To create the line. So when you get that like in the light, and it's kind of got that weird little shimmer to it, like shiny sand or whatever.
Yeah.
That's what I saw kind of come over her. And her hair got longer. Her wrinkles on her face went away. And so did her clothes. And she was sitting there looking like maybe a 18 or 20-year-old version of herself. And I sat down and I lost my words. I'm never at a loss of words. And I lost my words. And then all of a sudden, that shimmer, like that Etch-a-Sketch, shiny, shimmery, went back, and there she is, 47 years old, wrinkles on her face, hair is not as long, got a leather coat on, and her blue jeans. And she kind of leaned forward onto her knees, and she goes, "What's the matter, hon? What did you see?" And I said, "I didn't say anything." And she goes, And in my head, I'm thinking, what the is going on here? That one rocked me. And at that point, I was like, I need to get out of here. So I get in the car. I called my son, who lives up in Grand Rapids. And I said, "Dude, I got like 35 minutes drive home." I said, "You got to talk me off the ledge here, because I don't know what the hell I just went through." So I told him all the events of that night. And I got home, put the stuff on the computer, found out that I did not capture this like enormous, bombastic sound. For the next 3 nights, and I live in a brick house. Okay. So it's not siding. It's a brick home. Outside my bedroom wall, 3 nights in a row at around 2:00, give or take, I was woke up 3 nights in a row by the sound of something slamming against the brick on the outside of the house. Just a really loud thud. And it woke. But having looked into the Bigfoot phenomenon as much as I have, house slapping is it's a pretty common thing when people have them in the area of their home. I live in the middle of a neighborhood. I mean, the biggest woods we have is, maybe 20 yards thick. It's not, I'm not in a wooded area. I'm not out by myself. I'm not out in the middle of the prairie or anything. I'm in a normal neighborhood with maybe 40 feet between houses. Half acre yards, just normal suburbia. So I thought that was kind of strange, and I still don't know what that was about, but it happened 3 nights in a row. And after about 5 days, I called her and I sent her a message. I said, I got to ask you something. Do you have time to talk about this? And she said, yeah, sure. So I called her and I said, did you do that to me? And she said, what? And so I went on to tell her about, and I spared you the veracity of that sexual feeling that I had toward her the entire time we were there. Because again, she was a lovely enough person, but she wasn't my type. I wasn't that attracted to her. I asked her about that. And I said, I saw you turn into about a 18 or 20-year-old version of yourself when you were sitting on the corner of the bed. I said, I need to know. I said, I'm not prone to hallucinations. That's not me. I said, but I saw what I saw. And she's like, no, I didn't do it. And I'm like, come on, Susan. And she goes, maybe my spirit protectors were testing your intent. And I was like, testing my intent to what? For what end? I mean, she goes, I don't know. And she was kind of matter of fact about it, kind of flippant about it, you know. So I still don't know. I know I spoke to another person who does witchcraft, and there is apparently a spell that's called an Aphrodite spell that, if done properly, will make the person who put that spell on themselves like ridiculously attractive to literally anybody that's in close proximity to them. It doesn't matter if they're man, woman, child, you know, everybody is kind of tuned into that person. I don't know what it is. I can tell you though, I know something was acting on me during that. And that was strange. That was 3 hours, 3 of the weirdest hours of my life. And that episode has fascinated so many, you know, till this day. I realize it was early on in the career of the show, but it is ridiculously outplayed any other episode. It has just been, you know, Tony Merkel from the Confessionals had me on to talk about it. I've probably had 10 other shows that I've done, and you know, it's not that I don't like talking about it, but I've talked about it so much. It's like, God, I hope somebody asks me something different, but inevitably it always comes back to that episode. So I think that's kind of one of a couple that the show is known for.
The opinions expressed in the preceding program are those of the producer and not necessarily those of WKTV Community Media.